Carolina Hurricanes, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and the Winnipeg Jets have all lost key players, but also added some players to try to pick up the slack. But for which one of these teams is it enough, and which one of these teams will be hurting? We'll talk about all of that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show my long-lost cousin, Zach Martin of Locked On Hurricanes. And Zach, it's been an interesting offseason in Carolina. You know, here's a team that has been a consistent winner during the regular season for many years, but has had a little trouble getting as far as they want to get in the playoffs, and yet they go out and add Nikolaj Ehlers, K'Andre Miller. What are your thoughts about these additions and how they're going to fit in Carolina?
Yeah, of course, and obviously, thank you as always for the invite, cousin Gil. Nice always talking to you about hockey. The additions of Ehlers and Miller, I think it's really interesting how the Hurricanes, knowing the fact that the cap went up, they got, some contracts went out the door. They had, I think at the time was like the fifth highest payroll available going to free agency. And then it's, what are they going to do? And you see them, extend Logan Stankoven. And of course, then you said the sign and trade with K'Andre Miller, which I don't think anyone really saw coming. That was kind of like everyone was surprised by that one. But yeah, you talk about Nikolaj Ehlers, and I think while the Miller addition's really great, I don't mind it at all. I think getting Ehlers is probably one of the biggest moves the Hurricanes need to make, and they got it done. Because everyone knows it's, top six scoring the Hurricanes need it. The Hurricanes need to find the extra scoring. They need to find that guy who can, put the game on its head and stuff like that and change the tempo of it. And that's what Ehlers is. You look at his speed, he was always like in the 80, 90th percentile in like 20 to 22 mile an hour burst, 18 plus, like top speed. And the fact that he can score too. Yeah, he's not a 30 goal scorer, but he still gives you 20 to 26. He can hit 30 if he stays healthy. There's a chance he could hit 30, especially with the guys, depending on who he's on the line with. But you're adding a very bona fide top six scorer who finally got a little bit of a chance in Winnipeg. But from what I'm hearing, he's going to get a lot more of those opportunities in Carolina, probably first line, first power play unit, which he finally got in Winnipeg. But it seems like the Hurricanes are like, no, we went and got you for $8.5 million for the next 6 seasons. We are going to give you all the ice time and opportunity that you deserve, that you should get. And I'm just excited to see what he can do, because when you have a nickname like Fly, and you can almost do I saw like a highlight reel that AHL put out of him last season, 1-on-4, no issue, scored at top shelf. I'm like, sign me up for that for the next 6 seasons of a guy going coast to coast, going up against 4 guys and have a lethal shot. Yeah, I don't know how you cannot be excited for Nikolaj Ehlers to be a Carolina Hurricane for the next 6 seasons.
Obviously, last year, Mikko Rantanen comes. It doesn't work out. What do you think will be different about Ehlers that this will work, whereas Rantanen never quite did?
I think it just comes down to the fact that when you look at with Mikko Rantanen, you kind of hear afterwards that they were calling Colorado's bluff of do you want to be traded, stuff like that. He was going through contract stuff with them, then of course went through contract stuff with the Hurricanes, and immediately did that sign and trade to go to Dallas. Where I think with Nikolaj Ehlers, Ehlers knew right away that Carolina wanted him. They wanted him for the last couple of trade deadlines, and they were one of the first teams to get in contact with him and stuff like that. And he just, like what the Hurricanes, we're going to present to him. He saw, what the young talent the team has. He thinks that, he wanted a different challenge. And he think he can do it in Carolina. So I think with the fact that he was so bought into Carolina right from the jump, and he's excited to be here, and the fact that, that was one of his top teams that he wanted to go to. I think that's what's really going to help the Hurricanes, the fact that they got someone. It kind of takes away that narrative of how no one wants to sign in Carolina, which it's always wrong. I don't know why people – there's other teams that can get guys as well. It's not just Carolina, but I think when you get Ehlers, you see this like, okay, this guy wants to be here. He wants to – go to the next level, and it helps too that he's got a fellow countryman, Frederik Andersen, in net too. So now you get a couple Danes on the team. But I think it's, like I said, it's just with what the Hurricanes are able to have and him wanting to be here. I think that's gonna be a big difference compared to Rantanen, where it's like a guy gets traded from the first team he's ever been with, but now you get Ehlers, who leaves the first team he's ever been with, but wants to be in a spot where he thinks he can take it to the next level of his game.
Brent Burns, Dmitry Orlov not coming back. How confident are you in the blue line, and who do you think steps up to replace Brent Burns?
I'm feeling pretty confident about the blue line because the fact you look at, I mean, Father Time catches up to everyone, unfortunately, and that's just what happened to Brent Burns. Plus, he had a surgery in the offseason I don't think a lot of people knew about, so I think there is that little bit of that step back that we saw. But I liked Burns. He did a lot. I mean, he also had a lot more on his plate this year than compared to the season previous, where you had Brett Pesce and, Brady Shea taking a lot of the other opportunities. So now with, Burns and Slavin took a little bit more of the responsibility and just everything else. I mean, nothing against Burns. It's just unfortunately got a lot of ice time, had a lot more responsibilities than usual, and just had a little bit of a step back. Orlov was all right. I mean, starting out wasn't the greatest. Of course, then he got paired up with Jalen Chatfield. I think he finally figured his footing out. But, I mean, you get the addition of Keandre Miller. I know a lot of people are going to say, well, he had a really down season with the Rangers, when honestly the entire team had a down season. So I can't really say it's on one guy. Yeah, he made mistakes, but he's 25. And plus, we all kind of know, Gil, like the Rangers aren't really the greatest team in terms of development. So I think, and you look at Carolina, who are basically the blue line whisperers, especially when you get Tim Gleason, former Hurricane there. I mean, they turned around Brady Shea when a lot of people thought Shea wasn't a great defensive coming out of the Rangers too. So I feel pretty confident. I mean, plus, like I said, Miller's got speed. His offensive upside is a lot higher than what Burns and Orlov was going to give you there, recently. 100 block shots, 100 hits. Like, Miller's probably the most physical guy and will eat the most pucks for the Hurricanes, so I'm not really worried about that. I know some people think $7.5 million is a little bit of an overpay. I mean, that's just, contracts are going to go up, and I think you're investing in a guy who's 25. I mean, $7.5 million by next offseason when the cap's going to be 104. I'm not worried about it. Plus, Alexander Nikishin, considered one of the best defensemen come out of the KHL. He was the captain of St. Petersburg SKA for the last two seasons at 22 and 23. Over 50 points in the last 3 seasons for a defenseman. Offensive upside, old school hip checks. Like, how can you not be excited for that? So, yeah, I think you're going to have to see Shane Gostisbehere kind of pick his game up. Of course, he led defenseman in goals and points last year, so I'm not really too worried about that. Sean Walker got better as the season went along last year. Jalen Chatfield's going to get a lot more responsibilities too, because now it's like, okay, we're kind of looking at you to be the big speed guy outside of Gostisbehere. And of course, I mean, Jacob Slavin's the best defensive defenseman in the NHL. I'm not worried about that. So I'm feeling pretty confident overall. I think everyone's going to step their game up because, now you got 2 younger guys who are going to learn the system. But I think with where the Hurricanes are at, of course, just who they have been in the past, they've always been a top 5 defense. And when you got Tim Gleason, who's been kind of leading the way since Brendan Moore took over, not worried at all. I'm feeling pretty confident in this blue line too. There will be some growing pains, but I think as the season goes along, they're going to just go fall right back into, the Hurricanes are a top 5 team, top 5 PK. Yeah, not worried about it.
What is your biggest concern with this roster as of right now?
I would say the health of the goaltending is still going to be the question I'm going to be going into the offseason or going into the regular season with, because you do have now Kane Primo. You do have Amir Miftakov in the AHL for the Wolves, which, at least with Primo, you do get kind of that AHL experience with him. He's definitely your break glass in case of emergency, and hopefully there is no doing that, because Frederik Andersen has missed over 70 games the last 2 seasons. That's going to be the biggest question mark. Can he stay healthy? And if he can stay healthy, I mean, you can't really, nothing against the guy. I mean, what are you supposed to do with it when you get a blood clot and then you have to get surgery on your knee in back-to-back seasons? Like, that's tough. Like, that's just bad luck for a guy like Frederik Andersen. It's not like, he just something random happened or what have you. If he can stay healthy, I think the Hurricanes are in a good spot for goaltending. I mean, a lot of people would question Pierre Kachekov. I mean, the guy had 27 wins last year, set a career high. I mean, any team would love to have a goalie with that win total. Yeah, his goals against average and save percentage weren't the greatest. It was sub 900, upper 2.5. But you also have to realize, too, the Hurricanes were resting guys for the last 9 games. So take those numbers with a grain of salt. Like, Pierre Kachekov's won 50 games in the last 2 seasons with Anderson now. Like, he helped the Hurricanes make the Stanley Cup playoffs back-to-back seasons. So I think it's just the health of the goaltending is going to be the big question. And I think it's just the overall scoring outside of I think just if you look outside of the top 6, can your bottom 9 also help with the depth scoring? I think that's going to be, it's not the super big concern, but it's kind of like, I want to keep an eye on it as the season goes along. But I would say the biggest concern, just stay healthy for goaltending. That's kind of the big thing for me with the Hurricanes.
All right, Zach, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yeah, of course. You can find Locked On Hurricanes on wherever you listen to your podcast and also on YouTube. There it's also on X at LO_Hurricanes. And if you want to keep up with me on X as well, it is at OneTrueZach on there as well.
All right, Zach, thanks so much.
Hey, thanks, Gil. Always appreciate talking to you.
Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed Sponsored Jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you find the right candidates faster. I've been in that spot where you need to hire like yesterday. The pressure is on, and every day without the right person is a setback. That's exactly where Indeed Sponsored Jobs come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed, is all you need. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Penguins, Hunter Hodies. And Hunter, great to have you here. It's been an interesting offseason, without a doubt, for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Look, how do you go about judging the moves they made during the offseason?
These are about what you would expect from a team that is clearly in transition. They are rebuilding. They have not officially said that word yet, Gil, but all their moves indicate that, yes, this is a rebuild. They just have not officially put a label on it, but that is exactly what they're doing. You don't take on Matt Dumba's contract, which only has a year left and who wasn't that good last year, if you are not rebuilding. You don't trade for someone like Connor Clifton, who also was not good last year, if you are not rebuilding. So get those two trades, early in the offseason. You sign Justin Brazeau, which I like that signing quite a bit, can give you a bit offensively, can punish you in the defensive zone with his physicalness. Also decent with his defensive play, but he's really a big body that can throw a bunch of hits, and he's kind of a better version of Noah Chari, in my opinion. And then you have Anthony Mantha, who will try to fill the Anthony Beauvillier role, where if you can get, 15, 20 goals out of him going into the deadline, you can flip him for assets because it's only a 1-year term. Yes, he's coming off a torn ACL, but again, the hope is that he is last year's version of Beauvillier, and the Penguins got a second-round pick for him at the deadline when they traded him to the Washington Capitals. Everyone is waiting for, the big moves, Rickard Rakell, Erik Karlsson, Brian Rust, but thing is, Gil, they're not in a rush. Like, if some teams don't want to meet their asking price, they'll just be like, okay, well, we'll hold on to these guys until a team meets our price, and it seems like they have no problem doing that, potentially even into next season's trade deadline. But also right now, it's only August 10th. We still have a little over a month away until training camp. So anything can happen. We've seen 2 years in a row where Kyle Dubas likes to strike in August, and he also strikes kind of out of the shadows. It's funny. He learned a lot from Lou, I feel like, during their time together. Not a lot gets out when Kyle Dubas is running the show here, just like it was for Lou on Long Island.
Yeah, that could be frustrating if you're covering the team or if you're a fan. How is Sidney Crosby taking all of this? Because there's been so much talk about sort of the contradiction between needing to rebuild and trying to get Letang and Crosby and Malkin one more shot at the playoffs, one more shot at a cup. What has been the veterans' reaction?
Well, I mean, he knew he signed up for this. I mean, he signed an extension almost around this time last year, pretty close to this time. He knew what he signed up for when he signed that 2-year extension. He has 2 years left on this contract that's about to kick in starting this season. He knew what they were doing. So if he really wanted to, he could have been like, no, don't want to stick around, but he wants to be a Penguin for life. I don't want to really spend too much time on those baseless rumors that you see from these, weird NHL accounts about talking about him going to Colorado or Montreal. It's just not going to happen. He doesn't want to leave Pittsburgh. He wants to stay here and play with Kris Letang and Evgeni Malkin and potentially be here once this team wants to start getting better again. So, I'm sure maybe deep down could be a little annoyed, but for the most part, he signed up for this. So that's where it is at the end of the day.
First time in a long time, new coach in Pittsburgh. What did you think of the move? Were you surprised by it? And what do you expect to be different this year?
It's funny, I was surprised by it just because his name was not in there at all until I would say the final couple of days when Elliot Freeman went on 32 Thoughts and was like, oh yeah, Dan Muse I heard interviewed. And then once he put the name out that he was being hired, I think everyone in the Penguins fan base was like, who the hell is this guy? And I was like that a little bit to an extent. I had heard of him a little bit, but I was by no means an expert. I had to do my own research quite a bit. But, he's coached a lot of young players throughout his coaching career. He has a history with Rutger McGroarty, who I do expect to be on the Penguins roster this upcoming season. He had a really nice sample size to end last season playing in the top 6 with Sidney Crosby. So that relationship, that's going to be really nice to see. But, one of the big pillars of his system is puck pressure. Another one is puck support. So I think you're going to see a lot of those, or at least those main 2 things for the Penguins. But it's really nice that you will get to see also a fresh set of ideas. It felt like for a little bit, and even though I was a big Mike Sullivan guy, towards the end, I was like, okay, it's probably time to make a change here. And just some of his ideas were going a little bit stale, in my opinion. So it'll be nice to have a brand new coaching staff. They can bring fresh, innovative ideas to the team, and we'll go from there. Excuse me. This is Dan Muse's first NHL head coaching gig. He's obviously been on the bench a couple of times throughout his coaching career for NHL. He's been a head coach for a while before that, but in terms of NHL, he's been an assistant coach before a couple of times. So he'll bring that experience to this gig. But I like how he was able to surround him with good quality coaches. You have Todd Nelson, who has been a head coach for a long time, really good with development. He did a great job in Hershey. You have Rich Clune, who I'm curious to see how he does with development. You also have Nick Bonino, who he can relate to some of the core players. I really like that quite a bit. He'll work with the penalty kill, maybe a little bit with the forwards. And then you have Mike Stothers, who is also going to work the PK. He's been around for quite a while too. So it's a nice mix skill of veterans, but also some new blood in there. And that's why I think the direction, it's a good direction to go towards, in my opinion.
Is there any player in particular who you think will benefit most from this coaching change?
That's a good question. If he is still here, I could see maybe Erik Karlsson benefiting, just because I don't think he was fitting Mike Sullivan's system that well. You saw how well he played at the Four Nations in a different system for the Swedish national team. If he is still here at camp and for the regular season, will Dan Muse look to tweak a couple things in his game? How will he fit in his system? I mentioned Rutger McGroarty. I think that's going to be a really seamless fit for him because he's coached McGroarty before. Maybe someone like Ville Koivunen. We'll have to see. And maybe even Tommy Novak. I've written about this and talked about it quite a bit throughout this offseason. I think a lot of Penguins fans are sleeping on Novak this year. Only played a couple of games before he got hurt. So I think he could fit the system here fairly well as well.
Got to ask about the goaltending. It's sort of an ongoing issue in Pittsburgh. Where does it stand now, and how confident are you about the goaltending?
Well, not confident in Tristan Jarry, but it looks like he is going to be the starter unless something unexpected happens, Gil, where a team comes calling and they want to trade for him. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think he is going to start the season as a starter. After that, though, we have to see. There is a competition brewing between Yoel Blomqvist and Arthur Shelovs. And if I had to guess right now, I think Arthur Shelovs is going to win that job. He was amazing for the Baby Canucks in the AHL playoffs this year. Calder Cup MVP, well over a 920 save percentage. I believe it was 931 off the top of my head, if I have that right. He was tremendous for them. And when the games get big, he really steps up. His NHL sample this year wasn't the greatest, but I like that they were able to really get him going in the AHL playoffs. So he's going to come over, bring that competition, and say he wins that backup job during camp and preseason. Yeah, he'll have a chance to potentially push Jari this year, especially if Jari struggles, which, I mean, I kind of expect just because of how inconsistent he is.
Fill in the blank for me on this. This will be a successful season for the Penguins if?
Well, if A, they get the goaltending, B, the defense isn't that good, and C, I think, the bottom six really steps up and they really get great contributions, from the top six. A lot of ifs have to go happen for that if they want to make the playoffs. But if you want to flip it around, Gil, a successful season also looks like if they get Gavin McKenna and get the number 1 overall pick and piss everyone off. So there you go.
Something the Penguins historically have done very well when generational talents are on the line. Hunter, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Well, my dog's barking downstairs, so that's a little annoying right now. I apologize about that to everyone. But, you can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodies. You can follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. You can follow also me on the Hockey News where I cover the Penguins. And then you can follow my co-host, Patrick Damp at Send 'Em for Wet on Blue Sky and all the other platforms. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, all those other great platforms.
All right, Hunter, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch Money does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, Harrison Lee. And it's been a busy off-season for the Winnipeg Jets. But the big news is a subtraction. Nikolaj Ehlers no longer with the team. He moves on to Carolina. How are the Jets working to overcome this loss?
Well, they've done a lot of signings. They brought in like 3 or 4 new guys. I guess if you can point to any particular signing that's supposed to be the replacement for Ehlers, it's probably Gustav Nyquist. They brought him in for a year, $3.25 million. I think the reality, though, is that I don't know that they've actually found the Ehlers replacement. Like what Nick brings to the team, his transition game, his improvement on this year's power play. I still think they have yet to really fill that void. I think they've brought in a lot of stopgap options for a lot of departing players, but I don't really look at any one signing as having been the one that actually replaces Nick. What's sort of funny, though, is like when you think about it, because he was underutilized, in some ways the Jets may not miss him as much as they probably should. But I do think when you look at who kind of gets promoted in his place and some adjustments to special teams and just the general reduction in team speed, I think you're going to notice it in other ways. And you know, what he does in Carolina, I do have an idea of what's going to happen there. I don't know if it's going to be like beyond my wildest dreams, but I think he's going to do pretty darn well with an increased role on a team like that.
So are there any young prospects in the pipeline who, even if it's a couple of years down the road, could, because you mentioned stopgap, are there a couple of guys who could, in a year or two, step in and pick up some of that slack?
The only guy who has anywhere near the same kind of skill set is probably Brad Lambert. And I don't know how the team feels about him. Last year, he had an NHL stint for, a couple of games. I don't think he really looked 100% comfortable at the NHL level. I do think that partly, his last season with the Moose, he looked like he had a really big step back, but Manitoba was just a terrible team. So he was still top 3 in team scoring, but I don't think he took over the AHL like a lot of people were hoping. And so, I think he's one of those kids that really thrives on confidence and playing with skill. I don't know if that's really going to translate this year. And I would think it'd have to take a really big preseason and camp for him to really impress enough to get into this year's lineup. I do think he's on the short list for call-ups in case of injury, but beyond him, I just don't think the Jets really have anyone quite like Ehlers in their system. Lambert's the only one who comes close, and he's a little bit of a lottery ticket right now. So long and short of it is, I wish they had more. They have a lot of other intriguing archetypes for players like Kevin He, Kieran Walton, and some of these guys who will play different kinds of roles in games, but no one that I would say is a 1-to-1 or even like a 0.75 to 1 to what Ehlers is.
Jonathan Toews now coming back to Manitoba and joining the Winnipeg Jets. What can we expect from him? I mean, is anything he provides a bonus, or do you think he has a specific role on this team that he'll fill?
Lord, I wish I knew that answer. I think that's kind of where a lot of us are, is that, ideally he would have been your fourth line center. He brings a lot of leadership and veteran experience. He's been there. He's been a multi-cup winner. In his prime, he was one of the best centers in the league. But he's been 2 years off the ice, dealing with recovery from long COVID. He really hasn't said much about his own physical state beyond the fact that he wants to play. But he did admit that, the feet are still catching up. And I think that's probably pretty telling that, the first few months with him could be a bit of a learning curve. Toews is kind of coming in to be the Jets 2C, especially with Lowry starting the year on injured reserve. I just don't really know how this is all going to work. Toews ideally, I think, would, come in and be a plug and play player, but I think we all know that's just not that likely. A lot of people have said, oh, but Harrison, it's going to be like Landeskog, or look at Marchand, he's still playing. And I'm like, these guys have been in and around hockey, whether actively playing for an NHL squad or rehabbing with their orgs for years. That's not what Toews has been doing. He was in India, quite literally, taking a different treatment route. So I just don't know what to expect. And with what the Jets have kind of projected a little bit, I think they're suggesting he's going to be the 2C, and I feel like that's probably not the plan that I would personally go with. I think he'll be fine on the power play, but at 5v5, I just don't really feel comfortable with where his game's going to be at, and it might not really improve much. You might be looking at a guy who, in the ideal state, is really your 4C, but he's going to have to play elevated minutes if he's physically capable of it, and we don't even know if that's the case either. So this is a really weird black box that I don't think anyone has a clear vision on. And like the pushback I get from Jets fans is, he knows his body better than you do. And I'm like, sure, but he also has incentive to actually get back in the league. He'll say what he needs to say and do what he needs to do to play. But that doesn't mean that, at this stage of his career, he's, already late 30s. How, in game shape is he really going to be? And it's a tough call. So, all that to say, he is a huge X factor. I think your best guess is he's a bottom 6 center who might have to do more for the Jets, given the fact that Winnipeg really doesn't have a lot of high-end center depth right now.
What is your biggest concern surrounding this team with training camp about a month away?
Well, the Jets still haven't figured out the Kyle Connor question, and this is probably one of the biggest decisions the franchise is ever going to make. With Hellebuck and Scheifele, those contracts really weren't that expensive. Obviously, Helly is the most important player to the team, but Kyle is coming into an era of the league where revenue's way up, the cap's going up. So his next deal is going to be a 10-figure contract, 8-figure contract. And that's never been a thing the Jets have done before. The max they've paid somebody is like $8.5 million, 8.75. They have never gone, 10, 11, 12 mil. And so this is like a huge question, because whatever they do with Connor really decides what they do with this core. If he gets traded, which is extremely unlikely, then you'd be looking at a very different scenario. And I think the haul that you get for him could completely change Winnipeg's top nine. But if you resign him, you are now looking at a clock is ticking kind of situation as if it wasn't already. This team's already past 30. They have one of the older rosters in the league. Losing Ehlers and swapping them with, a number of veterans really doesn't fix things. And so I just think the Jets have really accomplished one of the most incredible regular season feats. But when it comes to the playoffs, they're still not really well prepared for it. And that's where I feel like, there continues to be maybe some stagnancy. And this last year was a really big improvement for their postseason run. They won 6 games. That's a huge change over what happened in previous runs. I think they won like 1 game in their last 2 playoffs, which is just crazy. And then this one, they had 6 games. Awesome. They realistically could have beaten the Stars, I think, if they had had a better trade deadline. And I will still stand behind that regardless of what people say. But, it is what it is, right? I just think this team is somebody said that they're kind of looking at maybe becoming the Isles in a few years, but kind of in the Lou era rather than the new Darsh, approach. And that's kind of something that's on my peripheral, and I'm thinking about it in the longer term. So these next 2 to 3 years, the Jets have to figure this out because, they need to figure out if they want to really believe in this core and roll with it, because if they do, they've got to add more to it. Or if they're thinking about the future and the fact that things are changing, they might want to start that transition with some of their kids now. And I do think at least 1 or 2 rookies might be filtering in this year.
Pivotal time, crossroads for the Winnipeg Jets. Harrison, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
You can find us at Locked On Winnipeg Jets. We're on all the same platforms that Locked On NHL is. And you can find me on social media at HL Living Loco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets.
All right, Harrison, thank you so much.
Thanks.
I want to thank my guests. I want to thank Zach Martin of Locked On Carolina Hurricanes, Hunter Hodies of Locked On Penguins, and of course, Harrison Lee of Locked On Winnipeg Jets for joining me today. I'm Gil Martin. I host the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, and I co-host the Friday edition along with Rachel Donner. Don't forget, here on Locked On NHL, we give you new videos Monday through Saturday, bringing you the biggest stories from around the hockey world. So make sure you hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. Thanks for watching and listening to the Locked On NHL podcast.